revolution, you had three issues. One was the restatement of quantity theory, policy making in a monetarist framework, and Raunak had a further issue, which was pegging the interest rate, that part. Okay. So let me start with Friedman's quantity theory of money, how he restated the Irving Fisher quantity theory of money. Okay. Okay. So before this, I think let me come to the discuss the crux of the issue, crux of the Friedman's theory, and then I'll go back and discuss the slides. Okay. Okay, so this is the sorry. This is Fisher's quantity theory of money. Okay. If we write it in the Cambridge form, then we can write it in this way. So it becomes KPT when K is equal to 1 by V. Okay, this is the money supply. Okay. Now, does money supply change frequently? Is it a, I mean, it's basically given at a point of time. Okay. You can see that it is one of the parameters of the model which is set by the monetary authorities. Okay. So at any point of time, you have money supply. Let us say it is 100. Let us say it is 1,000, and if the government feels, the government can change the money supply, make it 1,200, make it 800, whatever. Okay. So, okay. Now let us look into the nature of K. Now, according to Friedman, K is a function of rate of interest. Okay. Therefore, the rate of interest, if the rate of interest changes, K will change, right? However, he assumes that the elasticity of K, okay, the change in K, this is very low. So, in other words, see how much will rate of interest change? Will it change from 5 to 25? Or will it fall from 50 to 60? See, interest rate varies from, let us say, 1 to 15%. I mean, I've seen 15%, but this variation is over uh, 30 or 40 years. Within a year, interest rate will fluctuate by maximum 1 or 2%. Okay. So if the interest elasticity is very low, you can safely assume that K becomes a constant. Okay. So rate of interest changes very little, and its impact on K is even less. Okay. So what I'm saying is K is will be about 2 and 3, and the impact of, sorry, this is R, and del K by del R is very low. So for all practical purposes, we can hold K to be constant. Okay. So the function becomes, the quantity theory becomes something like this. We can write it in this way. This is what Friedman wrote. So we had said that money supply is 1000. Let us assume that K is 0.20. Okay. So if we substitute the values over here, we are going to get 1000 equal to 0.2 into price into Y. Or if I divide this, it becomes 0.2 into 10. It will become 1000, 10,000. It will become 5,000, right? Have you understood this part? Cat, run away with your tongue or what?
Sir, could you tell me like what have you written over there, like in this second bracket, the first line?
This one?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I'll rub it out. And that was rate of interest.
So Friedman took K to be constant.
Yeah, he recognized that K varies. K is not a constant, but it will change so little that you can virtually hold it to be a constant.
Okay, sir.
That was Friedman's argument. Okay. So if you have it like this, if you have an equation like this, then suppose I give you Y. Suppose Y is 20,000. So what will be price? I've given you 5 levels of Y. What is the associated level of price?
The first one is 0.25. Second one is 0.5. Then 1. And then 5.
Okay. Is this part clear? I don't need this. Okay. Now let us compare this with the Keynesian formulation. Okay. Keynes assumed that K is a variable. Okay. So in that case, how will I write this money supply equation? KPY. right? We know
Yes, sir.
that money supply right now is 1000. K depends on rate of interest, price and income. Okay. So if R changes, K will change, right? Now I'm giving you the same problem as before. Find out what is price.
So not possible.
It is not possible. We need to know what is key, right? This is one. What is key? Secondly, suppose I tell you K is 1. In that case, what will be price?
So same as before.
K is 1, and let us say, or let me do it in a slightly different way. I'm giving price. Price is 5. What will be income? See, in this case, if I had given you prices, you could also have found out income, right? You just need any one of these columns to get the other. But here, the problem is we have got 3 variables. So if I give you information on price, you don't know what Y is. If I give you information on Y, you don't know what P is. Okay, in this case, what happens? What is Y? I just need to show one small result. কি হলো বলো?
200.
Okay. Now suppose I'm giving this example for simplicity. K is equal to 5, P is equal to 1.
So 200.
It is still 200. So what we can see, the price is same, but it supports Y equal to 200 in both cases, depending on what K is. On the other hand, suppose I keep price 5 and I increase K to 2. What will happen?
So if K is 2 and Y is 5, then Y will fall to 100.
Y will fall to 100. Okay. So what we can see is we have two situations. One is that, sorry, just one minute. For the same P, we can have different levels of output. Right? We have also seen that for different price levels, we can have the same output. Okay. So in this case, In the Friedman case, we had a one-to-one relation between price and income. But in this case, it becomes a many-to-many relation. It's impossible to find out what will be output even if you know what prices are. Agreed?
Yes, sir.
So Keynes argued that we cannot use this quantity theory to set up a relation between prices and income. Prices and income, this relation cannot exist because K is a variable. Okay, Friedman on the other hand said that K may be a variable, but it varies so little that K is virtually a constant. You can approximate K by a constant. In that case, you can establish a functional relation between price and income. Okay, you can say that is the crux of the of Friedman's quantity theory of money. That can you use the quantity theory as a theory of prices? You have output, can you find out price? Friedman will say yes, you can find out because K is constant. Both agreed, Keynes and Friedman agrees that money supply is a constant. It depends upon the monetary authorities. The difference is in the nature of K. Friedman says K is a constant and therefore you can establish a relation between prices and income. If you have prices, you can find out what will be the level of price. If you have output, you can find out what is the level of prices. Keynes says K is not a variable and therefore you can't establish a relation between prices and income. You don't know what will happen. For the same price, you can have different income levels. For different income levels, you can have the same price. So it becomes a mess. So these two are the difference. The main difference is the nature of K, and because of the nature of K, we can use the quantity theory as a theory of prices. Okay, did you understand why I'm saying this and what I said?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now let's skip through Friedman's quantity theory. So Friedman's quantity theory, his starting propositions was that the demand for money was stable. Okay. How is this reflected? In a constant value of V. So V means K also becomes constant. The other proposition which we have not used was that the interest elasticity of money is not infinite but very low. So this means that the LM curve will be vertical. Okay. So he started with the Cambridge theory of version of the quantity theory of money. MD is equal to KPY. And he showed that if K was constant and money supply is set by authorities, this equation can be converted to a theory of which determines, you can form it in two ways. Either given price, you find what is nominal income, or given nominal income, you can find out prices. Okay, is this part clear? This is actually what I've showed just now in the paint. Now, the classicals had assumed that money was simply a medium of exchange. Okay, we used it just to exchange money. Barter will not be very efficient, so we need money by which we can exchange commodities. Keynes pointed out that money had an additional function. It was an asset. It was an asset just like any other financial asset, bonds, equities, etc. So, if I want to make a decision regarding the allocation of my wealth, should I hold it in the form of money? Should I hold it in the form of bonds? Should I hold it in the form of real estate, whatever? See, what we do is we compare between the different returns. So we have different types of assets. We compare between the returns and choose the asset which gives us the highest returns. Okay. Now, for simplicity, Keynes combined all other assets and gave them the aggregative name of bonds. Your bonds, equities, fixed deposits, etc. He used the combined word bonds. So the individual, therefore, has a choice between allocating wealth between either bonds or money. Okay. So I'm now talking about Keynes. Okay. Okay. Now velocity of money is equal to 1 by K. This is determined by rate of interest. Okay. If the rate of interest goes up, then the velocity of money will increase. Okay. So this function V prime is positive. Therefore, K, which is 1 by V, becomes negative. Okay. Now, given money supply, we can no longer determine nominal income from quantity theory. Okay. What I now have is 100V equal to PY. Without knowing what V is, I can't find out what is P into Y. As I told you that the theory breaks down. The one-to-one relation breaks down in the Keynesian case. Okay. So this is where Keynes had stopped. Friedman started from this point. He said, yes, the classicals were wrong. Money is a medium of exchange, but money is also an asset. So when I look at money demand, I have to consider prices and income, but I also have to look at the different interest rates corresponding to each type of asset. And instead of looking at a single aggregative asset, financial asset, bonds, Friedman distinguished between three types of asset: bonds, equities, and durable commodities. Now, if you purchase a house, the house will not give you an interest rate. Right? But what will happen is the price of the house will increase, what we call capital gains. So this is the returns on durable commodities. So the return on durable commodities is in the form of increased prices. Okay, so the classical function was simply money as a transactions demand. So Py was the two variables. Keynes extended the classical demand by including LR, money as an asset, and Friedman split up this, expanded this form to include the different rates of interest. Okay. Then Friedman argued, okay, so let us look at the second and third point. So Friedman does not segregate the demand function into components. He took it as a whole. So Friedman would have written the function as money demand in this form. Okay. Keynes wrote it as the sum of transactions demand and speculative demand. Okay. So this is he took an aggregative form. Second is he just took R, whereas Friedman took, you can see, he separated out the different forms of assets. These two are not major differences. The major difference comes over here. The money demand was stable, while Keynes argued that the money demand was unstable. So Friedman argued that K was a constant. That is why money demand becomes stable. And he argues that this varies with rate of interest. Either K or V, whatever, whichever form you want to take. Okay? Okay, now remember that Friedman was using the Cambridge money demand function. So, the Cambridge form was MD is equal to K into Y, KPY, right? So, K became a function of RB, RE, and RT, the three types of assets, into Y, PY. Okay, this is how he formulated this is the functional form. Okay, now over here, K is a function of R, therefore, it should become a variable. Okay. But, as I've said, he made two assumptions, which led to, see, this is simply a difference in the functional form. It's not a major difference. Now comes the major difference. Friedman said that RB, the rates of interest, does not affect money demand significantly. If rate of interest changes, the impact on money demand is marginal. As a result of this, he assumes, or rather he argues, that K will almost become a constant. Right? So the quantity equation will now become equal to Py equal to 1 by Km. This becomes a constant, K bar. Okay, it's an approximation because K is not completely constant, but the change in K is so small that there's no point in incorporating it. The difference in your results will be marginal. Okay. So this was Friedman's restatement of the quantity theory. Now, are you clear about this, or is there any specific issue on which you have questions? Is it clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I'll move to the third part, which was the interest rate. Pegging the interest rate, if I can find it out where it was. Then I'll come back to the policy making. Okay, policy making, which part did you have a problem? Over here? Come on, speak up, please. Don't waste time. I mean, in which part did you have a problem? This part, or there was a section before at the start?
Sir, could you go over the monetary policy once?
I'm asking which part? The front part of the lecture or the second
No.
part of the lecture?
No, sir, the second part.
Yeah, so tell me that. Don't waste time. Okay. Now, Friedman believed that the IS curve would be vertical. Sorry. Believed that the IS curve would be nearly horizontal. Okay. What does it mean? That it is the interest elasticity is very high. On the other hand, the LM curve is vertical. It is interest inelastic. Okay. So we start off with an investment curve like this, and we have the LM curve representing a particular level of money supply. So it's very easy to see okay, so this is why. So you can see over here that when money supply has increased, the LM curve will shift from L1 M1 to L2 M2. Okay. Now, given the nature of these curves, what is happening? What is the impact on money supply? What is the impact on income?
So the output, the income increases initially.
Yeah. But if you look over here, yeah. I mean, it's so close that I can hardly draw it. What is the impact in this case?
So it's marginal or almost no.
Almost zero. Yeah. So in the Friedman's model, you can see that money supply is highly effective. Okay, in fact, if you look at it, if you remember that when money supply goes up, there's a crowding out effect. Rate of interest rate of interest falls over here. Okay, so that is not there. Okay, so money supply is highly effective in the Friedman model. But if I look into the Keynesian model, money supply is almost ineffective. Okay. So remember two things. Remember these two things. Friedman assumed that the IS curve was horizontal. Keynes assumed that it is vertical. And Keynes assumed that it was the LM curve which is horizontal. Okay. So basically, they switched assumptions, you can say. There are two biometric poles. So if you make these assumptions, in that case, monetary policy is going to be effective. In the Friedman's case, it's going to be completely ineffective in the Keynesian case. Now, let us look at fiscal policy. Okay, so the IS curve is horizontal. The LM curve is nearly vertical. Okay, now we have a shift in the, we have an expansionary fiscal policy. I'll draw this later. So this is my Y. Now suppose government spending goes up. In that case, the IS curve will shift outwards. What is the impact on of fiscal policy in the Friedman model?
So there is an increase in the output, but that is also very small, like it's marginal. But R increases reasonably.
Yeah,
yes.
but I'm not interested in R, right? I'm interested in Y. So fiscal policy now becomes ineffective. Now let's turn to the Keynesian case. Okay, the IS curve is vertical. The LM curve sorry. Right? Now the IS curve changes. Okay, this is roughly the same shift as in this case. No, it's slightly more. So let me shift it. Yeah. Now what is the impact on income?
So there's a rise in income.
Yeah, and very sharp rise. There's almost, interest rate is constant, so there's no crowding out effect. So this is I1, this is I2. There's a sharp rise in Y. And because interest rate doesn't change, see, the crowding out effect is also not occurring. That is why Y changes so much. So if you believe in Keynes's assumption about the IS curve and LM curve, what sort of policy would you introduce if you want to increase output?
Fiscal policy.
And if you are a monetarist,
Monetary policy.
so this is what they are basically seeing. We are seeing over here. It depends on what you are assuming about the IS and LM curves. Okay. So let me remove this. So we are talking about the Friedman's approach. Friedman said that the LM schedule is almost vertical. That is, the interest elasticity of money is very low. Remember that K, the constant K, that is coming into play over here. When the rate of interest changes, money doesn't change that much. Money demand will not change. It will change marginally. On the other hand, the IS curve is flat. It's highly interest elastic. Okay, Friedman had said that assets are not homogeneous. So when I'm talking about a change in interest rate, it's going to operate through multiple channels. And that is why if the interest rate changes, the IS curve investment is going to change drastically. Okay. So over here we can see that the IS curve is highly interest sensitive, it's flat. The LM curve is nearly vertical. And you can see that a change in the money supply. So this is the equilibrium. When money supply changes, the increase in income is huge. It's quite large. Okay, so over here, this is the ISLM model, and this is the complete model when we have bought prices and income. So what we can see is for the same price, Y has gone up. Okay. So these correspond to different income, different levels of money supply. You can say this is M0, this is M1, this is M2. When money supply goes up, the associated demand for income output, that goes up, Y0, Y1, Y2. Okay. So what happens is the curve is going to shift like this. The demand curve is going to shift outwards, and therefore we will have inflation, but the equilibrium in output is also going to go up. Is this part clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, when we come to the fiscal policy, on the other hand, the budget deficit is funded by bond financing. Okay. So the IS curve is interest elastic and LM is interest inelastic. Okay. So the increase in G, let's suppose the government spends more, it will increase R, but not Y. See over here, check over here. R changes, Y changes marginally. Okay. So the money demand increases. What happens? We have excess demand. So I'm talking about the mechanism over here. The increase in G stimulates demand. Y increases. The money demand increases. We have excess demand in the money market. The rate of interest goes up till money demand is equal to money supply. Now, given the LM curve is interest inelastic, right? If you want to increase the money demand, you will have to increase rate of interest by a large margin. That is exactly what is happening. Now come to the investment side. It's interest sensitive. So a large rise in even a stake. Okay, no. So we had a huge change in rate of interest. Okay, in the money market. This is going to reduce investment sharply. So there's going to be a crowding out effect. The government sector had spent more, but investment demand is going to come down sharply because rate of interest has gone up. So as a result of this, the increase in G is cancelled out by the reduction in private investment demand. So in the ISLM market, the IS curve, if you look at the IS part, there's no change in Y. The demand remains same. Did you understand this, or will I repeat it?
So understood.
Okay. Now we come to the Keynesian case. See, Keynes assumed that I was interest inelastic, but LM was highly interest elastic. Okay, so you can see that these are the effects that we have derived. See, Keynes had assumed that we had depression in the economy. So the aggregate supply is horizontal. Velocity of money is not a constant. K is a function of rate of interest. Okay. Money demand also depends upon rate of interest, and because R has fallen to very low levels, the sensitivity of money demand to changes in interest rate is very high. LM curve is horizontal. Okay, so he's explaining why the LM curve is horizontal. Why is the IS curve vertical? Investment is interest inelastic. Given depression, see, in a depression, it's demand which is important, right? Investors know that even if borrowing becomes very easy, if I borrow and increase my productive capacity, it's not going to help me. I won't be able to sell what I'm producing. In fact, I already have unutilized capacity, right? So if I have unutilized capacity and the cost of borrowing goes down, will I increase my investment? Think about it.
No, sir.
No. So that means what is the cost of borrowing? It is rate of interest. So a change in rate of interest will not affect investment. That is why investment is interest inelastic. Okay, so I've just repeated this part over here. The left hand side is just repeated. This is the monetarist framework. The monetarist, on the other hand, had assumed that it was a boom period. Supply curve is positively sloped. Okay, so your capacity is already fully utilized. Okay, you're producing at full capacity. Now, if the cost of borrowing declines, will you invest?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, because you know that it's a boom period, you can always sell the extra output. So therefore, interest rate has a huge impact on investment. That is why the IS curve becomes horizontal. Now, why is the LM curve almost vertical? He assumed that K, or velocity of money, is a constant. So, rate of interest affects demand for money through the velocity. But if K is a constant, okay, so you can see over here, dr into dk, let me write it down, it will be easier. This is actually when the rate of interest changes, K changes. When K changes, money demand changes. But if K is a constant, what will happen? These del k's are 0. So this will become almost 0. That is why the LM curve is vertical. Okay. So if you just have to understand the economic context, whether it's a boom or depression, if it's a boom, you're talking about Friedman's model. In that case, these assumptions are realistic and you're going to have a certain type of IS and LM curves. The IS curve will be vertical, horizontal, LM will be vertical. On the other hand, if the economy is in the depression, then you're going to have a situation described in this part. So the LM curve will be horizontal, IS curve will be vertical. It's simply this. Now, if you know what the shape of the IS and LM curves are, just work it out. In a depression, it's only fiscal policy which is important. In a boom period, money supply is effective, not fiscal policy. Okay, so I've just brought this together.
So could you show the previous slide once?
Yeah, just 1 second. I wanted to see one thing. Which one?
So after this.
This one.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Okay. I'll give a 5 minutes break and then I'll come back and explain the pegging interest rate part. Okay. Okay. Okay, this is okay. Actually, Ronak had asked the question, but since he's not here, there's no point in discussing it. I'll relay his question. So he was asking, he did not understand this slide. Why pegging interest rate implies loss of control over money supply. So if you have understood it, then it's okay. I won't repeat it. So let me know whether you have understood it or not.
Sir, please repeat once more.
See what? See. Okay, so if you are a Keynesian, do you think that money supply is very important? Does
No,
it
sir.
have it doesn't have an impact on income, which is what you're primarily interested in. Okay. Now, during the Second World War, the government had to increase its spending by a huge margin. Okay. Now, this increased expenditure was funded by selling bonds at a low interest rate. Now, why was bonds issued at a low interest rate? Why not high? See, one reason why interest rate was low is that in that case, the investment cost, the costs, these bonds would be purchased by investors. So investors would be able to acquire funds at very low rates, and this would push up the investment demand. Okay. Second is the low and stable interest rate. It was not only low, but it was more or less kept stable or constant. This was important, and it led to a call to peg interest rate. Peg interest rate, do you know what peg is? Peg is a kind of nail, wooden nail.
But
So
basically fixed interest rates.
yeah, so it basically you're fixing, keeping interest rate constant. Okay. Now, pegging interest rate will, on one hand, mean that investors will have funds, their investment cost is low. Second is the speculative demand for money, which was highly unstable, that would become stable. Okay. So this LR part in the money demand function, it was highly sensitive to fluctuations in rate of interest. But if you keep R constant, then automatically LR also becomes a stable function. As a result of this, the US government tried to pull down interest rate and kept it at a low level. Now, there's a problem with this approach. See, this is the money demand function and this is the money supply which is constant. Normally, if you change money supply, let us suppose you increase money supply, in that case you are going to have excess demand. What happens is the rate of interest will change and it is going to pull down the money demand function. Okay. So you have now I've got it wrong over here. So the rate of interest will fall, money demand is going to rise, and now equilibrium will be restored in the money demand function in the money market. Okay. Now suppose R is constant. So now you have LR. Okay, so I can write this as theta. Now suppose for some reason there's disequilibrium in the money market. See, in this case, if you have disequilibrium in the money market, the interest rate adjusts. Is it possible here? Is the same mechanism possible here?
No, sir, because the interest rate is pegged.
Pegged R means this mechanism can no longer be doesn't work over here. So how do we ensure that we have equilibrium in the money market? Actually, K also depends upon rate of interest, but if you peg it, K also becomes constant. In that case, what will happen is, suppose we have a situation when you have excess demand. What is the only instrument left with the monetary authorities? Money supply. Okay. So if you have this situation, then that means the authorities will have to increase money supply so that we regain equilibrium in the money market. If money supply is greater than money demand, then we must reduce money supply till demand for money equals supply of money. So now what happens is, depending on what is happening in the money market, the Reserve Bank or the central bank must adjust money supply to ensure that money demand is equal to money supply. So now money supply no longer becomes an instrument by which you can uh, expand policy or whatever. You lose control. It becomes now it is simply use. You have changes in the market, and the Reserve Bank has to adjust money supply accordingly. Okay, in the previous case, what happened? In this case, what happened was, because you had a variable interest rate, if there was an excess supply or excess demand, equilibrium would be regained by an adjustment of the rate of interest. So the Reserve Bank could control money supply. If they wanted, they could increase money supply. If they wanted, they could reduce money supply. But here, changes are now forced upon the central bank depending upon whether you have excess demand for money or excess supply of money. So looking at the market situation, the Reserve Bank simply responds to the situation. Do you understand this, what I'm saying? So what it happens is, you have a loss of control over money supply. Instead of being an instrument for stimulating demand or controlling the increase in output, it simply becomes an instrument by which you ensure that the money market is in equilibrium. So that means you can no longer use money supply to increase or decrease income. Now, is this important? Remember the question that I asked you at the first, the starting question, that to a Keynesian, is money supply important? And what was your answer?
So we said no.
No, sir.
So over here, if you peg interest rate, this implies that you lose control over the money supply. The Reserve Bank can't determine whether to increase or decrease. So is this loss of control important?
No, sir, it's not important in the Keynesian case.
Yeah. So if you can't use money supply to increase or decrease income, it doesn't matter that you have lost control over an irrelevant instrument. Okay. But what would Friedman have said? He would possibly have a heart attack. Because to him, money was the most important factor. That was the only variable by which we could increase output. Okay, so do you have any other I'll just skip through the slide. If you have any problem, so I've discussed this. So you had identified 3 problem areas in the monetarist counter revolution. I've discussed all of them, and you had discussed 2 problems: price expectations and shift in AS curve in complete Keynesian model. One of you, Rajdeep, had asked about what book to follow. As I've told you repeatedly, for the first few chapters, it's Freund's Macroeconomics. Which edition, which chapter, it depends on which edition you are. By now, you should be able to identify the chapter. Please don't ask me to identify the chapter. Okay. So this Saturday and Sunday, you are going to have the exams. I by mistake I'd written I think 10 or 12, something like that, but it will be on Saturday and Sunday. So this is one. And the second thing is, after the exams, is there any other topic which you want me to discuss? I've discussed monetarist counter revolution, complete Keynesian, and I think discretion versus rules. No, I've discussed these 2 chapters. So is there any other chapter which you want me to discuss? Otherwise, I'll stop the classes.
So can we inform you after the exam?
It would help a bit if you can. Okay, fine. But in that case, we'll have to meet on Monday, because otherwise I will not know what area to cover. You can't just tell me. I can't just open the slide and explain it.
Yes, sir, we'll mail you.
Okay. Okay, so Tutulu,